Okay, so this happened back in 2016. I was 23 and working overnight shifts at this little warehouse just outside a tiny town in Ohio called Edenfield. I hated those shifts. Nothing but fluorescent lights, dusty pallets, and the constant hum of forklifts. By the time I clocked out, the sun wouldn't be up for hours and the roads home were usually dead quiet. Anyway, one night around 2:45 in the morning, I was on my way home after a long shift. I was driving my old beat-up Ford Ranger down this stretch of back road called Cold Hollow Road. Locals don't like driving it after dark. It's surrounded by woods that feel too quiet and way too dense even during the day, but it was the fastest route home, so I took it every night. I was about halfway through the drive when my stomach started turning, and I got that awful, urgent pressure in my bladder. You know the kind, no amount of shifting in your seat helps. It came out of nowhere too. 1 second I was fine, the next it was bad. There wasn't a gas station for miles and my choices were either pee my pants or pull over. So I slowed down, found a patch of gravel on the side of the road, flipped on my hazards and jumped out to do my business just a few steps into the woods. The cold hit me right away. It was early November and the air had this sharp, wet bite to it. While I was finishing up, I thought I heard something further in the woods, like a stick snapping. I froze and looked around, but all I saw were trees and darkness. Figured it was a raccoon or something. I hurried back to the truck, slammed the door shut, turned the key, and nothing. Just a single sad click. I tried again. Click, nothing. Third try, same thing. Come on. Man, not now, I muttered, punching the steering wheel. After 5 tries, I gave up. Didn't want to kill the battery for good. I left the hazards on and got out, hoping someone might drive by who had jumper cables. Not that I expected much traffic at that hour. Cold Hollow's not exactly a major road. 15 minutes passed. The woods were quiet, too quiet. You know that stillness where it feels like the whole forest is holding its breath? That kind. My breath came out in little clouds and the air smelled like wet leaves and something else. Something sour. Then I saw headlights in the distance. Relief hit me like a wave. I stepped into the road and started waving my arms. The car slowed down and pulled up behind my truck. It was an older, dark-colored sedan. Both front doors opened and 2 guys got out. They were big, like linebacker big. Hoodies, baggy jeans, one of them had a chain around his neck. Something about them made my stomach twist. Their faces were shadowed, but I could see enough to know they weren't smiling. I still forced a grin and said, "Hey, thanks for stopping." My truck's dead. "You got jumper cables?" They looked at each other for a second before the driver said, "Nah, man, we don't got that." The other guy added, "You stuck out here?" "Yeah, battery's dead, I think." The driver nodded slowly. "Let me call one of my boys. He's not far." He pulled out his phone and got back in the car to make the call. I stood there for a moment, heart starting to race for reasons I couldn't explain. Then I quietly backed away and got into my truck. Locked the doors. I sat in the driver's seat staring into the rearview mirror, just watching them. The other guy was still outside, pacing slowly next to their car. Glancing at me every few seconds, I pulled out my phone and called my cousin Tyler. He lived 10 minutes away, and I knew he kept jumper cables in his Jeep. After a few rings, he answered, groggy, "Dude." "What time is it?" "I need your help, man," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Truck's dead on Cold Hollow. Can you come quick? And bring something. Just in case." He paused, then said, "Yeah, I got my tire iron and that old bat in the back. Be there in 10. I felt a little better after that. I stepped out of my truck, waved to the guys and shouted, "Hey, I got someone coming." "I'm good, thanks." The driver looked at me, didn't say anything. Just slowly nodded and shut his door again. But they didn't leave. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Their car was still there. I called Tyler again. He said he just got in the car and was on his way. I told him to floor it. My gut told me something bad was about to happen. A few minutes later, another pair of headlights showed up in the distance. But this time it wasn't a Jeep, it was another old sedan. Same kind of car. It pulled up behind the first one. 2 more guys got out. That's when I really started to panic. The first driver got out, smiled, and gave one of the new guys a fist bump like they were old friends. Then the whole group, now 4 of them, started walking slowly toward my truck. No jumper cables, no tools. Just hands in their pockets and creepy grins on their faces. Then through the trees, I saw a pair of bright white lights speeding down the road. Tyler. His Jeep came flying toward us and skidded to a stop next to my truck. He jumped out with that old aluminum bat in hand, then tossed me another from the back. Tyler's huge like ex-wrestler big, and when he stood in front of me holding that bat, he looked like he meant business. "We don't want trouble," he said, loud and firm. "You guys should leave now." The guys slowed. One of them backed up a bit. Another mumbled something I couldn't hear, but none of them left. I glanced toward the first car and froze. The guy who'd originally been in the passenger seat, he was gone. I leaned toward Tyler and whispered, "One's missing." He didn't say a word, just nodded and went to pop his hood. He hooked up the cables while I kept lookout. The air felt thicker now, like it was pressing in around us. My ears were ringing and my palms were sweating. Then Tyler said my name real low. He tilted his head toward the woods. I turned. There, crouched behind a tree, was the missing guy. He was maybe 20 feet away, half hidden in the dark, watching us, waiting. Tyler whispered, "Start it." I slid into my truck and turned the key. The engine roared to life. I jumped out, watching the man in the woods the whole time, and helped Tyler unhook the cables. We whispered our plan. He'd back up fast, clear space for me, and I'd floor it out of there. We slammed the hood shut. Then we ran. Tyler dove into his Jeep and threw it in reverse. I climbed into my truck and hit the gas the second he cleared enough space. That's when it happened. A brick crashed through my back window with a thunderous smash, landing on the passenger seat. Then bang, 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 gunshots. My back window exploded in a hail of glass. I ducked low, heart in my throat, steering with just enough view to stay on the road. Tyler swerved ahead of me, tires screeching. Somehow we made it. They didn't chase us. We got home, shook up and covered in bits of glass, and told my Uncle Dave, Tyler's dad. He used to be a cop. First thing he said, "Cold Hollow Road? You're lucky you made it back." He told us stories about that stretch of road. People getting robbed, attacked, cars found abandoned with bloodstains inside. No arrests. No leads. I don't know what those guys wanted that night. Maybe to rob me. Maybe worse, but I'll never forget that feeling in the woods, the eyes watching from the dark. The silence. The grin that didn't quite reach their eyes. All I know is, I haven't driven Cold Hollow Road at night since. And I never will again. Have you ever heard a sound in the middle of the night that makes your skin crawl? Yeah, I have. Let me tell you what happened a few summers ago. It was 2019. I had just turned 24 and decided to spend the weekend doing one of my favorite things in the world, camping alone in the woods. I'd been doing solo trips since I was a teenager, and I always preferred the quiet and stillness of nature without anyone else around. Just me, my thoughts, and the trees. Peaceful, right? Well, not this time. I packed up my little hatchback and drove out to Bear Creek Woods, about 2 hours outside of my hometown, Reddale, in upstate New York. It was a place I'd been a few times before. It had this dirt lot where you could park and hike in a short distance to camp right by the water. Not many people knew about it, which made it perfect for someone like me who wanted to be alone. I arrived late in the afternoon, found a decent spot near the creek, and set up my tent. The sound of the water flowing nearby was relaxing. The sun dipped low and I built a small fire, cooked up some sausages, and sat by the flame sipping from a can of warm ginger ale. Everything was perfect, at least it was, until the fire started dying down. It was close to midnight, and I was zipped up in my sleeping bag, staring up at the roof of my tent, listening to the last crackles of the fire outside. Then I heard it, snap, a loud crack like someone stepping on a thick branch. Not too far off, somewhere behind my tent, I held my breath. At first I figured it was just a deer or maybe a raccoon rummaging around. That happened all the time. But then there was another crack, closer, heavier. Then I heard footsteps. Real, human footsteps. Not shuffling like an animal. These were slow, careful, steady, crunching across the leaves and twigs on the forest floor. And they were circling the tent. I froze. I couldn't even move a finger. I just lay there in my sleeping bag, eyes wide, heart hammering in my chest. The footsteps didn't stop. They made a full circle around me, then did it again. Always just outside the fabric of the tent. At that point, I convinced myself it was probably just another camper trying to find a spot. Maybe they hadn't seen my tent in the dark, so I called out loud enough to be heard. "Hey, you good out there?" No answer. The footsteps stopped, but only for a second. Then they started again, slower this time. Now I was sitting up, completely awake, sweating even though the night was chilly. I didn't have a weapon in my hand yet, but I knew exactly where it was, in the side pouch of my backpack. I always brought a small revolver with me just in case. I'd never needed it before, but tonight, I wasn't so sure. I unzipped the tent real slow. My flashlight was clipped to my hoodie. I flipped it on and scanned the trees, and that's when I saw it. A flash of light, not a flashlight. It wasn't the right color or shape. It was a glow, the kind you get from a phone screen. Just for a second. Then it went out. I wasn't alone, and whoever was out there had a phone and was watching me. I called out again, louder this time. "Hello, can I help you?" Still nothing. Just the sound of leaves rustling. Like someone stepping back, trying to hide. That's when it hit me. Whoever this was, they weren't just lost. They were trying not to be seen. They were stalking me. I couldn't stay there. Not another minute. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my bag and pulled out my revolver, placing it beside me while I packed. Every zipper sounded like thunder. I stuffed my sleeping bag, collapsed the tent without even rolling it, and kept the flashlight in my mouth so I could keep both hands moving. And the whole time, those steps kept going. I'd hear them pause, then shift again, moving around me, watching. When I was finally packed, I bolted. I didn't try to be quiet. I ran like my life depended on it. The trail back to the parking lot wasn't far, maybe a 5-minute jog, but it felt like miles. I kept thinking I'd turn around and see someone sprinting after me. When I reached the car, I tossed everything in the back, jumped into the driver's seat, and slammed the door shut. Locked it, started the engine. But as soon as I shifted into drive, the whole car lurched and made this awful grinding noise. My dashboard lit up, low tire pressure, all 4 tires. I got out with my flashlight, aimed it at the wheels, slashed, all of them. Every single tire had a long, deep gash. Someone had come while I was setting up camp, maybe while I was cooking, and cut them open. Now I was stuck. Middle of the woods. No cell service. No way to drive out without wrecking the rims, and that's when I felt it. You know that gut feeling? That primal kind of fear? Like you're not alone? I looked up. There was a person standing behind my car, just standing there. A man, I think, wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled tight over his face. His hands were hanging loose at his sides. Not saying anything. Just watching. I couldn't even scream. My voice just caught in my throat. I grabbed my revolver from the passenger seat, flung the door open, and aimed it straight at him. "Back away," I yelled. "I swear to God, I'll shoot." He raised his hands real slow, then turned around and walked backward into the trees, swallowed up by the darkness. I got back in the car and locked the doors again. That's when I remembered something. Earlier that day, I'd seen a little wooden sign near the trailhead. It had an emergency services radio frequency listed. I grabbed my emergency radio from my gear bag and tuned in. It took a couple tries, but eventually someone answered. I gave my name, told them where I was and what happened. They said a state trooper would be dispatched immediately. I sat in that car for almost an hour, gripping my gun, headlights on, scanning the trees for any movement. My heart never stopped pounding. Every little sound made me jump. A branch cracking, an owl hooting. Even my own breath sounded too loud. Finally, those red and blue lights appeared through the trees. I've never felt relief like that. The trooper came up to my window and I rolled it down with trembling hands. I explained everything. The footsteps, the phone light, the tires, the man. He searched the woods but didn't find anyone. They called a tow truck, and I rode with the driver to the nearest repair shop. I spent the rest of the night curled up in the back seat of my car in the lot, not even bothering with a motel. By morning, I had 4 new tires. By noon I was home. I never found out who that guy was. No one was ever caught. No one else reported anything weird that weekend, but I think about it all the time. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I see that phone light blinking on in the woods. Just for a second. Like an eye-opening. Watching, so yeah. I still go camping, but I don't go alone anymore. And I never ever ignore the sound of footsteps in the dark. You ever have one of those nights where something just feels wrong, not scary at first, not loud, just off, like your stomach knows before your brain does that? Something weird's about to go down. That's exactly how this night started. It was the summer of 1997. I was 17 and had just gotten back from a week at my aunt's place out in Cedar Falls. My best friend Tyler and I were doing what we usually did back then, cruising around in my old Dodge Shadow listening to cassette tapes, talking about girls and whether ghosts were real. Now my car was a piece of junk. I mean, I loved it, but it had problems, especially the gas gauge. The needle would get stuck, usually way below where it should be. Sometimes I'd fill the tank and it'd still show empty. Other times I'd be running on fumes and it'd look like I had half a tank. So I never really knew for sure how much gas I had unless I kept track. And after a week out of town, yeah, I definitely wasn't keeping track. Tyler had just gotten dropped off, and I figured I'd take the long way home through Mason Ridge, a small, out-of-the-way place with nothing but winding roads, thick woods, and weird, creepy houses that looked like they belonged in black and white horror movies. It was around 9:45 when the car gave up. No sputter, no warning, just dead. I coasted to the side of the road right next to a patch of tall pine trees. No streetlights. No other cars. Just me and the quiet. I tried the key a few times hoping for a miracle, but the engine didn't even cough. Out of gas. Awesome. I pulled out my flip phone, but of course I had no signal. This was the 90s. Cell coverage was basically magic back then, and I wasn't lucky enough for that kind of magic. I got out of the car, looked around, and that's when I saw it. Up on the hill to my right, just past the tree line, was a house, a weird one. It was tall and narrow, almost like a tower, with a steep roof and peeling white paint. It looked like nobody had lived there in years, but one light was on in the upstairs window, glowing yellow through the curtains. What else could I do? I figured maybe they had a phone I could use. I didn't want to knock on a stranger's door late at night, but I also didn't want to sleep in my car, so I headed up the hill. The grass was overgrown, brushing against my knees as I walked. The air felt thick and heavy, like it was about to storm, but the sky was clear. The closer I got to the house, the weirder it felt, like the temperature dropped a few degrees. I told myself I was just being jumpy. I stepped onto the porch and rang the bell. It made this loud, clanging sound like an old school bell. I waited. No answer. I rang it again, then knocked for good measure, still nothing. I was about to turn and leave when I heard it. A sound, low and muffled, coming from the side of the house. Not like a voice exactly, more like a groan or a whimper. It was the sound someone makes when they're trying not to scream. I froze, my heart started thudding in my chest. But curiosity pushed me to the side of the house, past a row of twisted bushes that looked like they hadn't been trimmed since the 60s. The sound was clearer now, like breathing. Ragged, desperate breathing with little gasps in between. I stepped back. I wasn't about to sneak around someone's yard in the dark like a lunatic. Just as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A movement in the upstairs window. The curtain shifted and a silhouette appeared. A person, just standing there. Watching me, they didn't wave. Didn't call out. Just stood perfectly still, their head slightly tilted. Like they were trying to figure out what I was doing. I backed away slowly. Gave the house one last look, then headed back down the hill to my car. It was darker now. The moon had slipped behind a cloud and everything felt wrong. The air smelled like wet dirt and something metallic. I tried not to think about it. Back at my car, I opened the door to sit and think, but I couldn't relax. I had no signal and no plan. I started pacing, hoping maybe someone would drive by. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. A man was standing near the bottom of the driveway. He wasn't there a second ago. He wore dark jeans and a long coat even though it was warm out. His hat was pulled low over his face and his hands were stuffed in his pockets. He just stood there, not saying a word. I cleared my throat and said, "Hey, I ran out of gas. Do you live up there?" He nodded slowly. His face was still shadowed and I couldn't make out his features. Then he said, "You shouldn't be here." His voice was deep and flat, like he was reading from a script. No emotion, just cold. I said something dumb like, "Sorry, I was just looking for help." He didn't answer, just turned around and walked back up the hill, disappearing behind the same bushes where I'd heard the noise. I stood there, frozen, feeling like I'd just been told something important in a language I didn't understand. After a minute, I climbed into my car, locked the doors, and sat there. My phone buzzed, 1 bar of service. I called roadside assistance. They said someone would be there in 30 to 45 minutes. I thanked them, hung up, and tried to breathe normally, but then I heard it again, the sound. This time it was closer, right next to the car. A whisper-soft breathing sound, coming from just outside the passenger door. I didn't look. I just stared straight ahead, heart racing, hands gripping the wheel. Then something tapped the window. Tap, tap, I couldn't help it. I turned. Nothing there. But when I looked back at the house, the upstairs light was off. Instead, the porch light had come on, and the front door was open, wide open, no one standing there. Just darkness inside. I should have stayed in the car, but something pulled me. Not curiosity exactly, more like pressure. Like I had to go back. Like if I didn't, something worse would happen. So I got out and started up the hill again. This time the night was dead silent. No breathing, no wind. Just the crunch of my shoes on the gravel path. When I reached the porch, the door was still open. I peeked inside. It was pitch black except for a faint flickering light deeper in the house. Like candlelight. The place smelled like mold and something sweet, almost like rotting fruit. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I stepped inside. The floor creaked under my weight. Wallpaper peeled off the walls in long strips. Old pictures hung crooked, showing people with pale faces and dark sunken eyes. The sound came again. From upstairs. I looked up the staircase. The candlelight was coming from the top. I should have left, but instead I climbed the stairs, heart pounding, legs shaking. At the top was a hallway lined with closed doors. The light came from the one at the end, which was slightly ajar. I walked toward it. Each step felt heavier. The air was thick, like walking through syrup. When I reached the door, I pushed it open. Inside was a small bare room with a single chair facing the window. In the chair sat the man, the one from earlier. He turned slowly to face me. His face wasn't right. His skin looked like wax and his eyes were cloudy like old glass. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. It looked painful, like his skin was too tight for his skull. And then he said, "She's waiting." I heard a sound behind me, a soft sobbing. I turned. There was a girl in the corner, maybe my age. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were dirty, and her eyes were wide with fear. "Help me," she whispered. Before I could move, the door slammed shut. The room went dark. I don't remember how I got out. I must have blacked out. The next thing I remember, I was in my car with the gas truck parked in front of me. The guy was filling my tank, chatting like everything was normal. I didn't say a word. Just nodded, thanked him, and drove off the second he was done. I never told Tyler, never told anyone. But sometimes, late at night, I see that house in my dreams. And the man at the window, he's always watching.